Loud. Well,
That's official.
that's actually incredibly helpful in starting this next session. So welcome back from our non-break, everyone. If you can hear my name, snap your fingers twice. If you can hear my name, clap 3 times. Now we have recorded how cheesy we make you all get if you don't come back from break. Anyways, so it is my pleasure to introduce Reggie Hall, longtime colleague and partner with CFN. He is not with CFN, but he'll tell us about that in a little bit. The only thing, should we actually pop up Nicole's view onto the screen here?
Oh, that would be nice. I'm not sure how to do it.
So we want to take the webinar view. Reg, do you want to get going and we'll see if we can?
Yeah. When it's go time for Nicole, because she'd be sharing screen, so she'll probably
pop up.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, Nicole, sorry, we'll try and figure out if we can pop you up on the screen, but we'll go through Reggie's slides first.
And Lee and I are talking at the computer because we've got somebody on Zoom. My co-presenter, Nicole Rose Marino from Southern Plains Land Trust, who will be talking in a few minutes. But anyway, Reggie Hall with the Conservation Fund, based in New Hampshire out of a home office. So I definitely feel the fact that like we're the next thing, we're like the thing between you and lunch, because my body says it's 2:30 and I'm starving. But anyway, a note about the Conservation Fund. Let's see, how do you advance on this rig? This isn't working.
What it is you're not, you need to just click back
the mouse?
Just click back on the PowerPoint.
Oh, okay.
Because if you're in Zoom land, if that's the last thing that you clicked.
Yeah, tried that. No.
There you go.
Oh, there we go.
Just takes a second.
Beautiful. Okay. So Conservation Fund, we're one of the national land and water conservation organizations, National Land Trust, founded in 1985 to be a service provider and a partner for conservation entities and partners, whether federal agency, local organization, and everywhere in between. Peter, I know mitigation is not on our overall agenda. Peter asked me to take a moment to just talk briefly about mitigation. We've got a mitigation program working with federal agencies. I know Claire mentioned mitigation in her presentation, whether it's compensatory, in lieu fee. We're frequently asked by the federal agencies and the energy companies kind of to come in towards the end of the permitting process to help with running those mitigation programs. So if anybody wants to talk about mitigation, I'm happy to chat about it. And I'll be around until after dinner. So back to the Conservation Fund, and as it relates to borrowing money, we are a borrower, just a really enthusiastic borrower and user of other people's money. We're also a lender. I ran our conservation loan program for 16 years. We're providing loans to local conservation organizations and also municipalities throughout the US. We also have a community development financial institution called Natural Capital Investment Fund. They're making loans to for-profit entities, mostly in Appalachia. And then from a borrower perspective, any given time these days, we have between 300 and 400 million of debt. A lot of that is foundations, PRIs, program-related investments. I'll talk about that. It also includes a $150 million bond that we did with Goldman Sachs in 2019. It's a 10-year note. So, but first, before talking about how do you borrow money, why, all that, alternatives to financing. First and foremost, maybe it never hurts to ask, maybe you have a patient seller or a flexible funder, and you can adjust to minimize or negate any time gap or funding gap. Maybe you can ask somebody else, like a conservation buyer or an angel donor, to step in and acquire or fund the thing that you're trying to do. Private sector partners like Lime Timber and others might be able to step in and acquire the site and become your patient willing, flexible seller, or partner with a larger group. Maybe your priority in your county might be a priority for a larger organization or entity that can step in and partner with you. A majority of the borrowing and use of debt in conservation is what I'll call bridge financing. We're talking about filling a time or funding gap of a few months to a few years. I'm not talking about 30-year home mortgages here. We can talk about pros and cons later about long patient capital and not so patient capital. But really talking mostly about a finite time or funding gap. So why borrow money? First and foremost, accelerating outcomes, whether that's acquiring tomorrow's park at today's price, or you've got a grant award, you need to spend the money, landowner can't wait around for a grant extension, or maybe you've been awarded a grant, but that money's not in hand yet. Also, it's an opportunity to leverage limited resources, i.e. your own balance sheet. Maybe it's grants or fundraising, all sorts of opportunities in there for leverage. Also, growing expertise, improving your external relations and reputation with your organization in the community. And then if you're a nonprofit, fundraising opportunities abound, especially in major donor cultivation throughout the process. But really, overall, what I'm talking about here is using debt to really wrestle above your weight class, especially for smaller organizations, ones that might not have a massive balance sheet. So really the primary sources of debt and loans that a lot of conservation entities are tapping, first and foremost, traditional institutions, commercial banks, farm credit, credit unions, those sorts of entities, foundations, whether it's a program related investment, a mission related investment, conservation lenders, and then also really a growing body of individuals, or what we'll call impact investors, are beginning to lend money, whether as an individual or as a group, to projects. And so we'll talk about that in a little bit too. So how do you begin to kind of sort out all the different lenders out there, and which one should you be working with? And so just a series of graphs here to think about. For instance, does your potential lender, is there mission alignment with your organization or your cause? And that can be incredibly important, especially if the worst should happen and things don't go exactly according to plan. Do you have the capacity and the ability to work with your lender to say, hey, can we get a loan extension here? The grant, got delayed, things didn't quite work out. We'll be, having to go to plan B, what have you. Some lenders might not have that flexibility. Other lenders, especially if you're trying to do conservation restoration and you're borrowing money from a foundation or a conservation lender that's got conservation in their DNA, lots of flexibility, and you'll be in good shape. So another way to contemplate things is also time it takes to get a loan. Can the lender move fast enough to get you your loan commitment or your financing in the time you need? Frequently, we always get the phone calls. Everybody thinks everything's going to happen, it's going to go well, and then inevitably you get the phone call from the partner. Hey, sorry, the grant's not going to be in hand in time for your end of year closing. So usually our phone lines light up around late October, early November, sometimes after Thanksgiving. And it's like, oh my God, end of year, help. We always love more time than that. But just being aware of where can you go in those emergency situations. Hopefully you've got a lot of time to kind of put together your financing package. But sometimes you don't. Also risk aversion and collateral requirement. Again, each lender's different. I think, Jill mentioned it last night at dinner, one foundation, same thing with lenders. And so kind of when you go back and you're unpacking mentally and physically from boot camp here, think about who is in your region, who could you potentially work with, and get to understand what their parameters are, what their ground rules are for engagement, so that when the time it comes, you are ready, ready to move. Also, a degree of difficulty. Sometimes, you know, we're talking about having to jump through hoops, and sometimes those hoops are on fire, and sometimes those flaming hoops are over a pool of lava or magma. You know, as far as going through the process to actually tap into the financing. Some processes are very quick, others might take quite a while. Just things to think about there. So I've got a series of slides. I am not going to go through them because I put them in the PowerPoint for reference for you after this. Really want to make sure Nicole's got time, but effectively going through opportunities and challenges with each of the 4 different types of lenders. So I'm just going to blow through these. Program-related investments. I don't know if we've really talked about what they are. I know we've got some experts in the room on them, but effectively program-related investment is fancy language for loan from a foundation. And what's cool about them is the foundation gets to count a program-related investment against their 5% disbursement that they have to do. This program-related investments are a product of the Tax Reform Act from the late 60s or so.
69.
Yeah. So, but and they're incredibly powerful tools that foundations use, but unfortunately, very a small percentage of the foundations out there. I think there are 80,000 foundations in the country, and like 3 or 4% use PRIs. And so, but if you can tap into them, your favorite foundation will provide you with a PRI. They're absolutely wonderful. And bonus, sometimes they will even forgive the loan and it converts to a grant. So, but you should go into the arrangement and agreement assuming that you're going to be repaying that sucker. So let's see, moving on, conservation lenders, I'll talk about them broadly. This is just a visual of the different conservation lenders that are out there. We all are working in various regions. There are some national programs. Norcross Wildlife Foundation is a national program. The Access Fund, based in Boulder here, they have a national loan program focused on climbing recreation opportunities. And so there are some regions, and this map is constantly changing. It's just a visual. Just found out, for instance, our friends up at Craft 3 that run the program in Oregon and Washington State, their conservation loan program now is kind of beginning to work up more around Puget Sound. So their funding came from Meyer Memorial Trust, a foundation. So anyway, just continuing to move on here. Opportunities with individuals. Purely, you know, seller financing is certainly an easy way. That's where the person that you are buying the property from actually provides you with the loan, i.e. you put down 10 or 20%, whatever you've arranged in your contract to buy the property, and they say, okay, we'll lend you the rest, and you come up, you know, essentially between you, the buyer, them, the seller, you come up with some sort of agreement where you're making installment payments over time at a certain interest rate. The collateral is usually the land that you're buying. But there is a growing field of lenders out there that are individuals, and they're coming together in groups. And so that's what I want to highlight next. So certainly some challenges, and we can talk about those, but impact investing is the kind of the new thing that's out there. It has been done historically, but it's really coming together in a formal way and also a not so formal way. So, you know, thinking about the spectrum of philanthropy and impact investing and where this all kind of plots out. This is just a little graph, you know, on the x-axis is financial return. So gifts like philanthropy is a negative return. They're giving money away. Mainstream market rate investments is a high positive return. And then the y-axis is impact, social environmental, whatever your impact is that you're looking to achieve. So negative impact would be effectively, you know, we don't care where our money goes, we're going to invest it in fossil fuels. Negative impact on the environment, you know, maybe in, you know, everything here that we're talking about is positive impact. We're trying to maximize positive impact and also generate a financial return. And so different ways, you know, we've talked about, and I think somebody has been mentioning, you know, can foundations make guarantees, or can individuals, you know, provide a guarantee for a loan to their favorite local organization or conservation efforts? Certainly. Program-related investments in nice loans, that would be conservation loans, or from conservation lenders, low interest rates, favorable terms, and bank loans. And then there are these pools of investors out there that are coming together and providing loans in that kind of nice loan territory. And so a couple of different ways that organizations have been doing it. One is fairly informal, and that is there's a group, for instance, like Legacy Works Group. They're based out of Santa Barbara. They've been working with land trusts mostly out west, but they're looking to expand this concept of putting together regional groups of investors or supporters of conservation and informally kind of aggregating them together to provide the conservation effort. Usually it's a local land trust with the capital they need to buy and buy the property that they're targeting. And so just a couple of recent examples. Legacy Works worked with 2 local land trusts and the Nature Conservancy to structure, you know, first and foremost, a non-refundable deposit, but then also bring together a pool of capital that ultimately wasn't needed, but, you know, aggregating $7 million for the eventual purchase. And really what's going on here is Legacy Works is bringing their Rolodex of high net worth individuals and pairing them with major donor supporters of the local land trust to come together and support that organization in their efforts by providing them with a really friendly financing package. And there are certainly other organizations out there, in particular, some of the more sophisticated land trusts are DIYing this. At the end of the last year, Land Trust on the eastern end of Long Island brought together, I think it was 6 of their major donors to provide them with $11 million in financing to go buy 100 acres on out in the forks of Long Island. So and very successful in doing that, and they've got a very you know, robust pool of major donor supporters, as you can imagine, out there in their geography. The other way that organizations are kind of DIYing this is a little bit more formal. Great example of this is up in Washington State, the Washington Farmland Trust. They have a farmland note, and this is a real, a more formal vehicle. They went through, worked with council to create an official offering, you know, creating a securities document and working with, quote, qualified investors to pool together the funds that they needed to go buy a farm. And so in this example, this is their first project. Total project cost was $3.4 million. They had $700,000 of philanthropy. They put together this note and raised $2.7 million in fairly short order. So the structure here, you know, they bought the $3.4 million farm. They're going to conserve the habitat with an out sale of kind of the bottomland, hardwoods and wetlands, sell a conservation easement, and then ultimately sell the farm back into private production to the next gen farmer, and while generating return for the investors. And so really interesting, they raised the 2.7 million, and that was an aggregation of 17 different investors, including one foundation that made a mission related investment, you know, out of their overall corpus. And it took, you know, 9 months to put it together. They had some patience there. So let's see here. Moving on. Yes, Lee.
Just as you know, one of the read aheads for resources, depending on your appetite, is an article on this particular note program. So if this kind of intrigues you and you want to delve a little bit more into how they stuck it together, how they made it work, you already have access to it.
Great, thanks. So some perspectives from the process, and this is kind of like, how do you make it all work? First and foremost, if you're, looking to borrow money or borrow other people's money, understand what the parameters are. Obviously, as a conservation lender, we've got some familiarity with like, what's a conservation easement and how is that going to play into financing and the funding of the overall project. And, in some instances where bridging an acquisition, the easement funding comes along and there's this partial payment. And in order to unlock that partial payment on our loan, we have to subordinate our mortgage to the easement. We're really comfortable doing that. A traditional commercial bank might totally freak out and not understand what it is you're asking them to do. Also, a number of more of the commercial lenders, they might have a real issue with acquiring raw land, i.e. there are no structures on it, i.e. the good habitat or the wetlands or whatever. So again, understanding those parameters, timing, fees, so on and so forth. What happens if we can't repay the loan? That gets back to, is there some mission alignment here between the lender and ourselves? And then finally, what's our interest rate? And I put that at the bottom because sometimes there is debt out there that is priced really low. And the reason why is because it could be incredibly hard to tap into. So a long process or a difficult process to tap into that. And so understanding that borrowing money at 1% at this amazing low rate, but it's going to take a tremendous amount of effort to get that versus an easier path of maybe borrowing 2 or 3% money, just understanding and doing that cost benefit analysis to just take into account the capacity and the bandwidth that it's going to need to tap into those dollars. As a lender, be prepared for these questions that you're going to get asked. How much do you need? When do you need it? For how long? What's your repayment plan? What do you have for collateral? I don't know at the Green Bank, anything, am I missing? Am I missing any of the major questions? Okay, so collateral. Obviously, not everybody is, Scrooge McDuck with the money bin. So how do you address the collateral challenge, usually as a under-resourced organization or entity? First and foremost, do not forget about your social capital. Frequently, through our lens, we're financing or providing financing to organizations that would never qualify for commercial lending. And they have, there might be an all volunteer group with $25,000 in their checking account, but their board is comprised of some, retired hedge fund manager from Manhattan, a major fundraiser from a national organization. You begin to put these pieces together and you understand that the financial capital isn't the only way as a lender we should be analyzing the credit worthiness of our borrowers. And at least that's how we do it. And always encouraging my fellow lenders, including foundations, to think outside the box. Because I know in some instances where we're trying to encourage a foundation to maybe make their first program related investment in a project, the CFO for the foundation comes in and then they start, running through the balance sheet and the financials of our nonprofit partner. And they're like, there's no way we'd make this loan. And it's like, but you're a foundation, where's the mission alignment? Where, how are you going to actually make your program related investment? Because none of the nonprofits are going to meet your traditional lens of creditworthiness and analysis. So also get creative. Think about the assets that your organization or your project has, and can you tap into them and use them as collateral? And just from the past, steel from the train tracks. We financed the acquisition of a rail trail. The rail line was still down. That steel was worth $1 million as salvage. Most recently, new one on the list, antique battle cannon,
Wow.
bronze piece of antiquity that was used at the Alamo. And as you can imagine, was worth a mint, not only as salvage, but also from a historical context. But anyway, just think outside the box. We've certainly, working with, especially if a foundation shares, is part of the fan club of our particular organization or borrower, sometimes we'll figure out ways to engage with them. Maybe we'll bridge a multi-year pledge so that they can make a larger commitment to the project, and we'll use that pledge as collateral. So just again, thinking outside the box. And a question that we frequently get asked is, how do we know which projects to finance? Ultimately, it's like figuring out what constitutes fine art, or how do you appraise fine art? It's like, it's in the eye of the beholder. I referenced the financial capital. Yeah, we collect the balance sheets. We look to make sure that there's a pulse and there's some good business practices there, but we are ultimately looking at the social capital, and then more importantly, the track record. Can the borrower or the prospective borrower actually do what they say they're going to do? Do they have a history in the past of securing the $1 million NACA grant, or fundraising at a comparable amount, or maybe a nice step up in their fundraising evolution? They're going from $300,000 to maybe a $500,000 lift or something like that. So that's how we do it. Happy to chat with you all after on different ideas. And then finally, best practices. Really, the top line: communicate with us early and often. Ask for help. A lot of lenders will provide technical assistance and help you think through your business plan, because we ultimately want to make your project happen. Think like a business. Sometimes a lot of nonprofit organizations, they'll especially land trusts, they'll come to me for a loan for just the acquisition on the project budget. But then I ask about, okay, well, how are you actually covering your costs, keeping the light bulbs on? What's your stewardship fund? So they come to me with a $700,000 project, but ultimately they need to be telling a story of $1.25 million project, when they're all in with expenses and everything. Some lenders like to be thanked. It's always nice to get a thank you note, or if you're working with a traditional bank, get that press article out there thanking them, really helps. And then finally, keep us updated as the loan repayment process begins. Yay, we got the grant. Bummer, we didn't get the grant. Big gift came through. It didn't, what have you. Again, getting back to technical assistance, we might be able to help. So that's just broad brushstrokes. Ready for questions? Yes.
Reggie, I'm Jeff Stumpf at St. Redmond Fleet. Curious where you find yourself on the curve of the different types of lenders. I'm talking about the fund itself.
Yep. Conservation lender for sure.
And then what's your rate today?
So we price our loans on a scale of from prime, which is currently, I think today, 4.75%. It's like rocketed up in the last few months, down to 70% of prime. And we use that scale to reward good behavior or strong project metrics. And in some instances, we'll work with our borrowers to structure the loan commitment to try and serve as like a lead challenge grant. So in other words, here's your loan commitment for $1 million at whatever, 4.5%. If you can drop this, if you can raise whatever, $400,000 in pledges between now and the closing, we'll lower your interest rate to 4%. Or, what have you, just to try and incentivize, forward momentum.
And then what's the size pot you offer?
So currently, we're about $15 million. So we hit a peak a few years ago at about 50. We're now down to 15 as we reallocate internal capital. And, if you're in California, mean, first phone call should be to Julie at RLF, because you can tap into the Packard money and like 1%. But, you know, where we frequently interact with them is, you know, they only meet 3 times a year. And if your project's moving too quick, you know, sometimes, you know, we'll give Julie a call and get her blessing to kind of bridge their participation. So like we'll step in for 3 months, 6 months,
I also
whatever.
don't like to do multiples in the same time period.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so anyway.
Yeah.
Thank
you for that.
Yeah, sure. Any other questions? Yeah, Drew.
So how do you see some of your vendors financing the debt service of the loans? I'm assuming, say you have like a bridge period, interesting, I guess. You have a bridge period for a holding, I'm assuming that they're, when they finally sell, when they make the acquisition, that there's, you know, maybe it's a flip, say it's to another years,
Yep.
they're not able to recoup interest payments in the term. How typically is that? Typically just philanthropy that they're.
Yeah. So, you know, and it's kind of part of the story of leverage, right? Is help us, you know, raise blank to help us unlock double blank in funding and financing. And so usually it depends, you know, as a conservation lender, we understand the business. Most, like 99% of our loans are balloon payments, i.e. we know the grant's coming at some point in the future, they repay the grant and all the principal and the interest comes back in at that point in time. So effectively no interest payments until the end. Other times where it's a fundraising effort, we'll incentivize, you know, we'll say, what do you guys want to do? You know, is it helpful to kind of have a semi-annual interest payment to keep the spurs to the donor base? Like, oh my God, we got to make another bank payment this month, help us get there. But anyway, so it really depends. Well, Peter, and then I want to turn it over to Nicole.
One, you covered the landscape remarkably well, but one thing that has happened in the last 3, 4, 5 years has been accessing the community foundations donor advised funds. So I don't know how many of your organizations have some type of relationship with the local, regional, statewide community foundations, but community foundations are composed of families and individuals who create donor advised funds. And Vermont Land Trust was the first to do this about 6 years ago, where they went to a couple of those fund advisors and said, "You're giving us giving us money every year. What if you didn't give us money for the grant, made a loan?" Vermont Community Foundation said, "Wow, that's a cool idea," and recruited about 7 other of those families who had donor advised funds.
Yes.
And that's now been replicated by a number of other community foundations and by the commercial donor advised fund holdings like Vanguard and Fidelity. I wouldn't, if you have no relationship with the community foundation, just like, don't pay attention to what I just said. If you have a relationship with the community foundation, or you grow, build a relationship with the community foundation, there's just remarkable leverage to use the donor advised fund for something other.
Thanks, Peter. So I might turn it over to Nicole and then handle all the questions after. So I want to make sure she can tell her story. And I put this back up just to kind of reorient everybody. And Southern Plains Land Trust is this amazing partner. Nicole can't be with us today, but they're down in the southeastern part of the state, past borrower of ours. And she's got a really amazing story and has tapped into these different pots of money throughout the spectrum, including guarantees, bank loans, conservation lenders, all of that. So she's on this amazing journey and I can't wait for her to tell her story. So she'll be appearing shortly.
All right.
Great.
And
All right.
I'm just gonna say, Nicole, for your benefit, we have about 10 minutes for this part and then we'll do 5 minutes of questions.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Okay, sounds great.
So I will launch right in. Thanks for having me and thanks for allowing me to zoom in. It's always great to team up with Reggie. And as I think about how we utilize impact loans for land acquisition, it's really about maximizing leverage to preserve more wild nature than we otherwise could. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. Uh, Great, thanks. So we are an accredited land trust, and we go by the nickname SPLIT, as well as Southern Plains Land Trust. We create and protect a network of shortgrass prairie preserves to ensure a future for all native animals and plants in the region. Our preserves currently extend across 38,000 acres. I've asterisked that because on July 15th, we will increase that number to 56,000 acres, largely using impact loans. Our geographic scope is Southeast Colorado because of the extensive intact habitat here and also the relatively low land prices, but our actual purview is much larger. It's all 5 states within the Southern Great Plains. So we are a streamlined organization. That's one way to put it. We have a very small staff. We stretch our capacity through wonderful volunteer board of directors and a core of volunteers. We try to keep our overhead low to funnel donor dollars into land acquisition, but we feel the urgency around an accelerated pace of conservation inspired by 30 by 30, for example, and the twin crises of the climate as well as the extinction crisis. And so that's led us to embrace multiple $1,000 multiple thousand acre deals that cost multiple million dollars. So why so urgent? Well, we really are looking at our mission as bringing back the American Serengeti. There used to be just tremendous amounts of wildlife and diversity of wildlife on the Great Plains. Some of that remains, some has been lost. We liken our work to that on the African Serengeti. It's an imperfect analogy, but it's really meant to convey that this is a region well worth preserving. And in sticking with the African theme for a moment, we think of the big 5 in the Great Plains as really bison, the prairie dog ecosystem, grassland birds, prairie streams, and elk. And here are the bison we've reintroduced onto our Heartland Ranch Nature Preserve. We're doing a lot of work on prairie dog ecosystem restoration and are queued up to reintroduce the black-footed ferret pictured under the prairie dog there, which is one of the most endangered mammals in North America. So really excited to be part of its recovery story, hopefully. Grassland breeding birds, rapidly declining gilded birds in need of help. And then prairie streams really need the woody riparian forests to come back, and we're working every year to make that so. And then we don't think of elk generally as a grassland species, but they are. They were a grazer and really hunted out of the Great Plains by the 1900s, but they are coming back. And these are elk that are pictured on our Heartland Ranch Preserve. So we want to give them more of a safe zone to roam. So the Great Plains is severely underprotected. Only about 1 to 5% is in any sort of conservation, and we need to push that number up. And we aim to do that by bringing more and more acreage within the Split Preserve network. And you can see here our upward trajectory. And throughout our history, we've really relied on loans for these leaps forward. In 2015, I think of that as the Conservation Fund difference. Not only has Reggie and the Conservation Fund team lent us on 3 occasions to significantly increase our preserve network, I think Reggie has trained me to be a more savvy impact lendee and put together bigger and bigger deals. In 2020, another foundation got on board with lending split money for a land purchase. And this year, we're working with an array of impact lenders, which I'll go into in a moment. Since 2015, our increase in land base is really about the expansion of Heartland Ranch Nature Preserve. We established this in 2015 at 11,000 acres. We're able to grow it to 18,000 acres in 2018. grow it again to 25,000 acres in 2020. Again, this is all contiguous. We're expanding this one preserve. And then in 2022, we were queued up to make a big land purchase and then but stagger it and do another in 2024. But why go the easy route? We decided to do it all in 2020, really inspired by bison and by 3030. And so we aim to add 18,000 acres in July to Heartland Ranch, growing it to 43,000 acres. And here's another way to look at that. This is a map showing you that this is rolling grassland. There's about 57 stream miles within the current border. The black border is our current Heartland Ranch, and the red and blue is what we are adding in a couple of weeks from now. So there's 57 stream miles all flowing to the Arkansas, which is the largest watershed by area in Colorado. So we really have the opportunity to make meaningful strides forward for watershed health in the Arkansas. And there's also opportunities to expand not only Heartland, but our nearby Raven's Nest Nature Preserve. And that again sort of adds to our impetus for a rapid pace of expansion. So what is key is that Split is not going this alone. Grant funders are really important for the 2022 Heartland expansion. Those include Great Outdoors Colorado and National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. Lenders include a private party that Reggie linked us with, as well as foundations, including the Mighty Arrow Foundation, who I know is there. Thank you, Mighty Arrow. And they were brought to us by Align Impact. And then we are dealing with a commercial lender who's providing us with a very large line of credit. Carbon is important for our land purchases. In fact, every dollar we generate from our carbon offset program, we put into land acquisition in order to really demonstrate additionality for moving the ball forward on climate change mitigation. Split individual donors help us on our land acquisition. We had our best capital campaign ever last year, which was is all directed towards expanding Heartland Ranch this year. Historic and conservation easement tax credits offered in Colorado are also part of our funding strategies. And then partners, we have a lot of partners involved. I think most importantly is Colorado Open Lands, which holds the easements on all land that we purchase. So if Split waited until we had all the money in the bank before we purchased a property, we quite simply would not have 38,000 acres, soon to be 56,000 acres in our preserve network. And so we're finding that bridge loans are really essential given the timing of when the funds are received versus the need to seize opportunities to acquire land. And Reggie went through this quite well, so I won't retread on that. But for the 2022 land purchase, impact lenders and one commercial lender are involved. But I do want to underscore that we have seen what Reggie suggested and some of the issues with working with commercial banks. But one is the nonprofit financials really are generally foreign to the commercial lenders that we've talked to. They don't like the lumpy cash flows that nonprofits generally have to deal with. And then there's this issue of mission neutrality. You know, the impact lenders we're dealing with really want us to succeed. They're inspired by the bison. And so there's going to be a lot more flexibility there, and we appreciate that. So we much prefer to work with impact lenders. So Reggie did ask me to reflect on some lessons learned. And so of course I went to the Fort Collins base Advice for Life. They come up with these clever advice from nature. And I love octopus. So I immediately went to octopus and they were very helpful. Listen to the octopus, be flexible. You know, you often run into brick walls and you need to learn how to circumnavigate them and realize that that new path is probably better than the original path, and that there are many paths to success. So I think that's key, to be flexible both for the lender and the lendee. There's a lot of pressure. This is an $8.3 million deal that we're putting together. That's our largest ever by far. And we need to just embrace the challenge. And then sticking to what matters, you can get lost in the minutiae of, you know, bylaws, articles of incorporation, your financials. all of these nuts and bolts kinds of documents, but it's all for that bigger goal, the bigger picture for us of expanding our shortgrass prairie preserve network. So keeping that focus continually in mind. Lots of tight spots we run into. We're dealing with a lot of different entities, different expectations, different decisions. And so having contingency plans, I think, are key to making sure you get to that wonderful conservation outcome. And then just going beyond the octopus, building a team. I think this is really critical, both internally and externally. We deal with not only the entities I've mentioned, but all the folks that are doing the due diligence for these big transactions. And you need a good team to make sure this transaction occurs and sets the stage for even better future transactions. Good communication with the seller. I can expand on that if you like, but I want to be cognizant of your time. You need to repay the debt. We do it either on time or early, never late. That's crucial if you're going to get another loan. And hopefully we're spreading prairie fever, and we've had a lot of repeat lenders. That makes me think that we've been successful in helping people see what a wonderful place the shortgrass prairie can be. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. So Lee, I don't know, but I would rather, since Nicole's with us for a short time, any Nicole related, split related questions, I want to prioritize those because I'm going to be here for several hours more. So.
We're doing a microphone or?
We don't, well, actually, the microphone might work this time.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah, there we go.
Hi, this is Charlie Carlin, Gathering Waters, Wisconsin Alliance for Land Trust. Nicole, first off, thank you. You gave me a 101 on carbon markets a couple of years ago. That was super helpful. I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more detail about your revenue streams for paying back these loans and how you sort of piece all that together, given that you are holding this land and not turning around and selling it.
Yeah, that's a great question, Charlie. Carbon is a big part of it. If you think about it, well, the program we're in with the Climate Action Reserve is a 50-year program. And you're going to be lucky if you get year one by the time you close. Sometimes you can put together forward sales, but really, I think that's part of it is you need to bridge the gap between when you buy the property and when you get the carbon dollars. Reggie mentioned NACA. We do have a NACA grant for this acquisition, but we don't expect to see that until the end of this year if we're lucky. The tax credits are also important. Those don't come at close. We're about to get a historic building renovation tax credit, hopefully in the next actually couple weeks that may come in time, but that's sort of aberrant. So those are some of the revenue streams. I didn't mention wildlife mitigation, but we have done a purchase that was funded by wildlife mitigation dollars, and we would like to do more of that. And then, good old fashioned fundraising. We often have to fill the gaps by going to our donors.
And to clarify, in Colorado here, land trust can donate a conservation easement to another land trust and then monetize the income tax credits. And so in many of the earlier loans where there was a smaller amount, we were actually bridging those tax credit transactions. And so we were comfortable for that little bit of time when the easement had to go down on the property in order to get the credits, in order to unlock the payment. So we would subordinate our loan to the easement.
And that's specific to Colorado.
That's a Colorado thing.
Virginia.
In Virginia. Yep. But any other questions for Nicole? Yeah, Em.
Thanks for joining us, Nicole and Reggie. I think this question is something that both of you guys can answer, so I'm curious what you guys will have to say. From my experience talking with land trusts about potentially going into and borrowing money, there's a lot of fear. They almost have to have an appetite for it, staff and boards. So what have you guys experienced to sort of be proactive in that and to engage with more land trusts besides events like this? And then Nicole, what specifically catalyzed you and your board to make that decision that borrowing had to happen for you to be successful?
Okay, I'll dive right in. So this is not the first time I've teamed up with Reggie. I've also co-presented with him at Rally to really do that outreach to other land trusts, that this is a very viable way to increase your ability to do more good conservation instead of just waiting for all the money to be in the bank. I think that's really important. Managing risks is critical. It's been part of Southern Plains Land Trust's culture since our inception in '98. Our first land purchase was a seller financed acquisition. We've sort of done all of the above, that where Reggie described the various places to get loans. And now we have a really great loan repayment track record that if it were an issue, for instance, with new board members that might, sort of be questioning this approach, I can show that we've been able to manage those risks for almost 25 years now that we've been in existence. And, I really am happy to talk to other land trusts about how we have managed those risks. We are accredited. We're very conscious of our fiduciary responsibilities. But I really think it's a critical tactic to do more with us.
Yeah, and frequently I find myself providing therapy sessions to staff to help them with talking points for the board, because individually as American consumers, we love debt, credit cards, car loans, home loans, but you get on a board, no loans, and it's pretty interesting. And some organizations, super calculated, low risk opportunity, foundation, multi-year pledge. We provided them with a loan commitment. Board says, no, all loans are bad. We can't, as a fiduciary, we can't take that risk, even though they had a multi-year pledge from their local foundation for the loan. And so it's really hard, but I think Nicole's right. The peer-to-peer exchange is incredibly valuable. And so, for folks in the Delaware River watershed, ton of organizations, whether it's Brandywine or French and Pickering or whatever, they've all done loans. Have your ED call their ED, board president call their board. How did you guys do it? That exchange is incredibly potent in de-risking the concept. So.
I was wondering whether you take on the loan yourself. You take on the loan always into your entity, or do you ever set up different kind of vehicles to kind of manage risk for different projects? And then I was also wondering, do you ever consider taking on equity finance instead of loans, and sort of the investor shares and the benefit, the higher potential, but then you don't necessarily have the risk of repaying? Don't know if you've thought about that.
Nicole, would you constitute Acme Grasslands as equity investor or just a conservation buyer?
I think they're a conservation lender.
Okay.
Yeah, I think everything for us, if it hasn't been commercial or seller, it's been a conservation lender.
Okay. So the answer is no equity investments yet for you. Right. Okay. We as a yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, we haven't explored that. No, we've used, I guess, the more traditional of the conservation finance tools.
Yeah. Lee, I leave it to you as far as timing and lunch and how you want to manage it.
One more question.
Okay. Or actually, were any of those questions for Nicole? Or just general? Oh, she had one in the back. Okay.
Well, it's actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Actually, it's just some observations and
Also, quick name and affiliation for Nicole.
oh, sorry. First Hunter, Connecticut Green Bank. And I'm new to the conservation space. Very new. like this week. First of all, Reggie mentioned earlier, and it's about what's so important, and I want people to really focus on it, and that is tell a story. Because when we entertain loans ourselves, we want to know that there's a good story there, that there's an impact. Tell us about your people, that you can get it done, you can get across the finish line, you've got a track record and so forth. That's number one in my book. I don't even look at the numbers until I hear the story. What are you trying to do? The second thing is non-traditional lenders, they're great. I mean, they're flexible, they can appreciate a variety of collateral, revenue streams and so forth, and they have an open mind for different structures. Just be careful about getting your face ripped off with interest rates, that come with that. Reggie doesn't seem to be like it. The traditional lenders, banks have a role, and when Reggie and Nicole find out what that is, please let me know, because I haven't known. No, I mean, meaning that the issue is, and I wanted to make you laugh because I know you've gone through the frustration, is that credit committees, and I love the way Reggie had it. It was like high interest rate, a lot of time, and it's almost like, why do we even bother with them? It is because when you're looking for major serious dollars, or you have a program that you can get them to sign up for, it's worth going through it once, because you can get a rinse and repeat if you're going back to the well again and again. And then you get some efficiencies with time. But anyway, those are just some observations I wanted.
And a great place to mine for board members at the local bank if you need one.
And they offer terms here.
Yeah.
You're talking about short-term financing.
Yeah.
Commercial institutions that offer longer terms.
Yeah. So.
Can I speak?
Oh, go ahead, Nicole.
I just want to speak to that why bother with commercial lenders issue. That was a contingency. So for our transaction, we had a multi-million-dollar hole left by one of the impact lenders. But luckily, we had a parallel strategy going on with a commercial lender who ended up being really easy to work with. And that's the plan B that's really going to make the bigger transaction work. So I had the same sort of aversion, having dealt with commercial lenders in the past, but boy, am I happy that we had that in the hopper as a parallel track that ended up being crucial to the success of the project.
Also, this is on. Just turn it off. Can you hear me now? No?
Hold it up.
Hold it up to the mask.
Hello? I just wanted to add, the story that Bert was talking about wasn't Lesser Prairie Chicken, or it was, have you paid back the loan before the track record, your funding strategies, like that story, not butterflies.
Well, Nicole got me with the bison. It was like, oh, wow, bison. We don't have those in New Hampshire. But yeah, I mean, the track record is pretty amazing. So
real quick, this thing really is hard. Hello? No.
Okay, Claire Harper, U.S. Forest Service again. I just want to tie back to our panel discussion on deploying federal funds for project acquisition or easements. And I ask, it's an observation, but also a question for the two of you. In my experience, what we call pre-acquisition, or the conservation fund in particular stepping in, or another organization stepping in, pre-acquiring the land, doing a bridge fund strategy, getting loans, etc., is I found it to not only help with timing, trying to figure out the timing of your different funds of source, and in my case, federal funding, but also making it possible for the federal funding to come in at all. So restructuring maybe several different tracts of lands, putting it together, cleaning up title issues, and then making it this like nice, pretty package with a bow on top, that now federal funding, we can come in and it's easy to do, and then we're the takeout strategy. So I just wanted to highlight that as it's not just about timing, it's also about making deals like to fit
your different funding sources, or be easier for different funding sources, and especially for federal.
Yeah, and we are frequently being asked to bridge the local match of the federal funding source. So, you know, the application can be submitted or the federal funding can come through because the local match is taking longer than anticipated.
Yeah, and the Baldwin Woods story I told earlier was the conservation fund, and that would have absolutely not been possible. I told you like the end part of the story, the first part of the story was TCF bought up all the different pieces, little tiny tracks, dealt with the minerals issues, and then brought in the next part of the funding, including mitigation and federal funding.
All right, I'm so sorry to cut us off, but we're 23 minutes late to lunch, so we're gonna stop this session and let folks eat. Please join me in thanking Nicole and Reggie.
Thanks, Nicole. Miss you.
All right, thank you, Nicole.